Greetings, DFG here. Hey, this video is dedicated to the fathers and to the sons across the country where relationships are not what they should be. Relationships are not, or they're struggling inside of these relationships or those relationships. And this is more centered around, Gideonsflight, and what our intentions are as an organization, and why we believe that it's important to have conversations. So, for you or non-members, I just want to just kind of let you in a little bit on some thoughts that we have. Many of us are fathers, and unfortunately, many of us are fathers who we would readily admit we don't have the best relationship with our sons. And it's not because we're deadbeat dads, and it's not because we are selfish or self-centered, because all of those things men have heard time and time and time again. And I don't make excuses for men who don't stand up, for their children and provide for their children. As a man of faith, as a believer in the Word of God, and someone that would never question the wisdom of God, it's stated clearly. If a man doesn't take care of those in his own household, especially his children, that man is not counted as a believer. In other words, that man is not recognized by God for his manhood. So this message is in no way to justify, men not fulfilling their responsibilities as fathers. This message is more centered around a good conversation around understanding that, one have to take in consideration the body of work that's not only involved in one-to-one relationships, but also the culture in which those relationships originated in, and then also from an expanded culture, what was passed down from one generation to the next generation. I will tell you, as a young man or young boy myself, I hated my father. And let me go a little bit farther. I'm going to be transparent with you. I hated my father for several reasons, but the number one reason I hated my father because my father chose to be abusive to my mother. And this abuse was not done in secret. This abuse was done in front of, 8 children. Oldest, I think at the time, may have been 8 or 9 years old, youngest 1. And remember, the chaos in the house, the screaming, the hollering, the crying, because of, his abuse towards her and us wanting him to stop, but being too young to do anything about it. And so I felt very justified for a long time around my feelings towards my dad. I remember growing up after my father left home and left my mother to raise, 8 kids in the housing projects through government assistance and assistance through the Catholic Church and other charitable organizations. I remember just, when folk would come and tell me, man, you remind me of your dad, or you look like your dad. Not remind me, but you look like your dad. I would just look at them, with so much, hatred, I guess, in my eyes. I wouldn't speak it because I was too respectful to be disrespectful to adults who would make those comments. But I despised my father to the degree that I didn't even want to be associated with him, even from an appearance standpoint, if you can believe that. And, and I lived with that bitterness for a long time, just not understanding, why he could be so, cruel and so abusive. And it's funny, a funny thing happened, as I matured into adulthood and began to, to be a father myself. And and began to really understand, the importance of human sacrifice, personal sacrifice, things that are involved in being a father. Where I make no excuse for his behavior around his attitude and action towards my mother. I could not also not, be honest enough to remember the times that, he was a good father. I remember him, making sure that we were, in church. I remember him making sure that on any special occasion we were some of the best dressed kids, in our neighborhoods. I remember, him taking us on trips to the zoo, taking us on trips, out in his hometown in Mississippi, where he was from. I remember him being a jokester and just really being a hoot when he wanted to be. And as I thought about my father in the fullness of the man, then I had to step back and recognize that it wasn't right for me to label him in one way and just say, you know what, because you did this one thing, you're no longer qualified to be a good man. Because you left the family, you're no longer qualified to be a good man. And again, I'm not encouraging or trying to justify, fathers leaving their children. But, if I wanted to be more personal about it, I could probably tell you now what I did not know then, some of the dynamics around why my father did leave home and what his struggles were, as a human being, as a person. And because I understand those things better, I want to just say to the fathers out here and to the mothers, who also share parenting with some of these fathers who have not stepped up to the plate, is to just say to you that, don't just judge him or, based off of, his inadequacies, and try to really see him, as a person. Has he ever been there? Has he ever, bought a box of Pampers or a bottle of milk, or tried to provide a roof or put clothes on their back or bring home a meal? And I'm not saying that, a man has a right to, be a part-time dad no more than a woman has a right to be a part-time mom. But what I am saying is that when you start looking at people in their imperfections, you start looking at men who were boys and in some cases had no idea how to be a father. No idea. Never saw it modeled, never saw an example of it. It just was not around them. To hold them to a standard that they never knew or never understood, I'm not sure that's looking at that with balance, and I'm not sure that you're looking at it, with a clear perspective. In order to make fathers the fathers that you imagine them to be, you have to create an environment where they can see what that looks like. Not just in theory, not idealism, but who is spending time with these young men, teaching them to be fathers? What are these young men being exposed to help them understand the sacrifice and why that sacrifice is important as being fathers? How to break the generational curse as in my family. And my father was not the father I wanted him to be. And you heard some of the reasons why. But you know what? I did take the initiative myself to say, well, although I still don't know what it takes to be successful in fatherhood, I do know what hurt me as a child. And I took that knowledge and tried to be the best father that I can be to my sons. And depending on which one you ask, I could get an A, I could get a C, I might get an F. But I think if you look at the whole body of work, the one thing I can say is that, I broke bread with my sons. I sweated and worked hard to provide for my sons, and I definitely did the best I could to train them up, in the aberration and the knowledge of what it would take, to be a man, to be decent, to be respectful, to be accountable to others, as well as being accountable to God. So I'm not saying that I'm a superhero in no way, and I'm not saying because I did it, you can do it. What I am saying is that if you really want to see this generational, what I would call curse, broken, I can tell you this for certain, it's not going to happen through constant criticism. It's not going to happen because of constant, belaboring the fact that, there are no good fathers. These men all are selfish. They don't care. They're no good. You can keep on with that. You can go on and on and on with that. But I'm telling you, you might as well, have a quarter, for a cup of coffee, because that's about all this is going to be worth to you. And I don't even know if you can get a cup of coffee for a quarter. So I wouldn't waste too much more time or too much of your valuable time, just in the critical aspects, in the demeaning aspects, even if what you're saying has some truth and equity to it. I think what's more important is how do we build an infrastructure for men and teach men, not only the young men, but the older men, the importance of family. And what value does a family bring to him? What does life look like when you have other people to genuinely care about you because you cared about them? How about a second chance or a third chance or a fourth chance? There's a story in the Bible where Jesus was asked by one of his disciples if his brother offended him, how many times should he forgive his brother? And for you Christians out there, a lot of you who are probably guilty of some of this stuff I'm talking about, not judging, just sharing, he told this man told Jesus, how many times should I forgive my brother? 7 times? I mean, goodness gracious, I forgive him once, I forgave him twice. Okay, 3 times, this is not registering that this guy's wrong. 4 times, 5 times? How many times? 6, 7 times? I got to forgive you 7 times for your misbehaving or your poor behavior? 7 times, is that enough, God? You know what God told him? No. 70 times 7. That's how many times. For your mathematicians out there, I think that's like 480 times. And I often wonder, well, why did God use 480 times to talk about forgiving somebody? Goodness gracious. Am I supposed to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 25, 35, 40? No. I believe he said 480 because by the time you got to a certain number, you would understand the importance of forgiveness. So let's try forgiving the fathers. And let's try leading them back home to helping them understand their significance, their importance, their necessity. And let's work on the fathers so that the fathers can go back home and work on the sons. And the sons can grow up to be better fathers that we all can be proud of, ideally and realistically. Thank you for listening. I love you. DFG, Gideonsflight.